Okay, there we go. I got your video.
Okay, great.
Yeah, it's finally nice to meet you, even though it's over Zoom, but I hope you're doing well. You had a good holiday and Happy New Year. So,
All that jazz.
yeah, for sure. But I just want to thank you for taking the time out of your day to answer these questions. I really appreciate it. So,
Great.
yeah.
I don't know if it's on my side. Can you put your volume up a little bit for me?
Yeah. I think it's up all the way. Can you hear me better now?
A little bit.
A little bit? I'll try to speak a lot closer to the computer, maybe.
Okay, cool.
Okay, so I'm just gonna get started with the questions, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, the first one, I just kind of want to know some background information about you. Like, when did you study at UVic, and what was your experience overall with the writing program, and what genres do you want to specialize in? Just like your experience with school and getting started as a writer and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, I transferred over to UVic. I did a little research because it's been that long. Would have been a fall 1993.
Oh, wow.
And it was called the Creative Writing Department back then, before scholarships and stuff, and they dropped the creative. Yeah, and I transferred from Kwantlen, which was college at that point, and so that was a big deal. It was a big deal to leave my family home in Langley, and it was the best decision I think I ever made. So yeah.
That's awesome. What genres did you do exactly?
Pardon me?
What genres did you specialize in?
I mostly did poetry.
Yeah.
And then I started to dabble into nonfiction. Yeah. And I think the sentences sort of scared me a little bit. Yeah. And the irony of that is, like, I love short stories and I love fiction, but I tend to edit it more than write it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
But I was definitely doing more poetry and nonfiction during my time there.
Sweet. So then I want to know, after kind of graduating from school, I want to know how you exactly developed into your career as a writer. Like, what kind of job experiences did you go through? Did you do freelance and stuff like that?
Oh God. Okay. Well, I think of, like, most writers and artists and stuff, many of my jobs were, like, I worked at the UVic bookstore. I worked at the Royal Bank for a couple of years. Like, someone who's as left-leaning as I am should not work at the Royal Bank, but that's a whole other story. Maybe that'll be a book one day. And I think that I kind of just learned, if you want to be an artist in this country, you have to learn to cobble. So you put stuff together, and you take little gigs when you can. And I was fortunate because I was doing a lot of readings, and I learned early on, get paid to do readings, right? People say, oh, it's great exposure, and it's like, actually people die of exposure in this country, right? So just learning to get by with a little bit less, when possible, trying to get roommates who were, worked in catering because they could bring food back later at night, that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, that's awesome. So what was your first publication? I want to know, and how did you go about accomplishing that? And can you just kind of explain the process of how you...
Yeah, well, I mean, publication's a bit, it's tricky because there's, like, publication in a literary journal, for instance, then you have, like, your book. Book is a kind of a different thing. So I think, like, the first student publication was something called Susurrus, if I remember correctly, at UVic. And then there was something years ago called the BC Festival of the Arts. And I won an award at that. That was a provincial-wide kind of thing. And they put out an anthology that I was in. But my first journal publication was in Prism International, which is out of UBC. And then my first book was The Asthmatic Glassblower. Mm-hmm. And I think that, a lot of those opportunities came about because I was going to readings and volunteering and helping put stuff on and really developing a community. And, I know that most writers love to kind of hang out by themselves. It's a lot easier during a pandemic as well. I'm not sure if people will watch this. But, the danger of just hanging out by yourself and writing by yourself all the time is that you just end up writing about writing, or you just end up not really knowing folks. So it's important to engage with community and have that visibility or people just seeing you, because you never know. Like, there may only be 4 or 5 people at a reading, but one of those 4 or 5 people might run a magazine or a publishing house or whatever and say, hey, I love that poem. Can I publish that one? Or please send us some stuff to us. So
Yeah,
I
it's
think
pretty
that
much all
people,
about making connections and stuff.
yeah.
Yeah.
And connections is not a dirty word. Like people think it has to be like super coked up film, folks. Don't do those kind of connections, folks. But just like actually engaging with people. And it doesn't have to be, this messy kind of slimy kind of thing. It's just like, you're hanging out with somebody at a launch. You're lucky because they happen to have some cheese or some a little bit of catering for a book launch, and you're sitting beside somebody or standing beside someone. Well, look, say hello to
Mhm.
see what goes on, right?
Yeah, totally. So as you were saying, you really enjoyed writing poetry. So you've written like many poetry collection books, and I want to know
Hmm.
kind of which one, if you have a favorite collection that you've written and why.
You can't ask people that. It's like, which child do you prefer? That's what you're doing. Um, I think that, like most writers, I mean, my favorite poem is that poem that I just wrote, right? Because that's kind of like there's excitement about that. I think all the collections, it's a bit of a time and place. Some of them are easier to do than others. I have a thing where I call you like you pull poems from the air. Little hand gesture for everybody there. And those are the poems that I don't know if you were just in your dream space or what's happening, but you write them and like it's super easy. And then you have other poems that you spend years researching and thinking about and I'm not sure where to go. Then you go there. Um, so sometimes you like those ones a lot because of the work, but sometimes you also hate those ones because they took so much work.
Hmm. It's crazy.
So
Sometimes it just
yeah,
pop into your head. Other times it just takes so long to get some that you like. So.
yes.
Mhm. And next, I want to know, like, because poetry can be like a very subjective genre. Like to
Hmm.
you, like if you're like writing a poem, or if you're like looking at someone else's poem, what makes it good to you? Like, what makes it stand out than from others?
Yeah, I think with poetry, it doesn't necessarily have to be neat and tidy. I'm always drawn to poetry that makes me look at the world in a new way or appreciate the world in a new way. Like whether that could be the craft, it could be the form, it could be simply the content. But it needs to make me consider. And sometimes that could be humorous, can be serious. It doesn't matter. But I have to I have to kind of leave that poem going with a like that kind of
Hmm.
that introspection and a little bit of a curiosity that goes on. The whole subjective thing, it's just like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
What,
totally.
what can you do?
Mhm.
It's weird because I feel like we only do that with poets. Like we don't do that with the other genres, and
Yeah.
like that onus of having to be, oh, you're so subjective. Like we don't do that to playwrights. We don't do that to novelists. It's just out there, right? And we don't do that with music.
Hmm.
And music is so broad of what it can be, right? And I think poetry has that kind of same feel to it. So
Yeah.
we gotta put a little bit less pressure on the poets because we don't have a lot of money and we're really stressed.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because everyone just, oh, anyone can write a poem, but it's like no, like it actually takes a lot of like thinking and like work to actually make something
Well,
flow.
and the weird thing is like anyone could write a
Yeah.
poem and you could even write a good poem, but can you write a second good poem and a third and a whole
Yeah.
book and then 5 books and 6 books, right? So yeah, it's one of those
Yeah.
things where you can be really lucky and it can happen and then just have just crappy poems for the rest of your life. So
Yeah. So you've also written, you said, a creative nonfiction book called "Let Me Kiss It Better: Elixirs from the Not So Straight and Narrow." And like, I
yes.
want to know, comparing like you writing CNF and poetry, do you find it easier to express your ideas through poetry or through CNF, or is it kind of like a balance? Or
Well, you know what? A lot of the pieces in that book were columns that I wrote for Extra West for like years, and what I loved about that was the immediacy, and it wasn't quite like Sex in the City, where she's a sex columnist, but it was kind of in that realm. But that thing of having your work out there, then once a month people would open up the paper, and then people would, like strangers would give you feedback they would recognize. So it was so amazing to have that immediate um, like interaction with the readership and the city and to be able to talk about, like at that point it would have been Vancouver, or just, you know, where I was traveling at that time in Canada. And I don't think the Canadian writers get that enough. And I think that's what I miss the most about all those newspapers, is that we don't have that kind of writing. Yeah, we have, you know, we have blogs and there are some online presence, but a lot of the time it isn't able to be as hyper local, and people have to kind of search it out. So I do miss all those boxes where, you know, every street corner, whether it's the Georgia Straight or Monday Magazine. I don't think Monday Magazine's Victoria still, are they?
I think so. I'm not
Oh, they are? Okay, well, if they are,
but,
good for Monday Magazine,
yeah,
right?
I
But
could be wrong,
yeah,
but yeah.
those free, you know, those alt dailies really allowed writers to have that space, and I don't know if we have that same ability. That was a rambling response. I hope that was okay.
No, all good, all good. Next,
Good.
I want to notice, like, I know it's kind of like a very broad question, but like, what is like the best advice you give to students who are aspiring to become writers in the future? Like, what's kept you motivated to like keep going?
Well, you know, part of it is if you have to, you will, and you have to be kind to yourself, particularly nowadays, and you need to read. And you need to be engaged, you need to be curious. When I say you need to read, that doesn't mean that you need to read like, well, maybe you know, you need to engage as well, read and engage. So read books, read stuff that has nothing to do with your area, and stuff that is in your area. Watch documentaries, use your time, you know, those little YouTube clips who go to YouTube hole, that's fascinating for authors, right? And I consider that research, and that's part of it. But you do have to write. So if you want to be a writer, you have to write.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of folks fall into the trap of just doing writerly things and wearing turtlenecks and berets and being fabulous. And that can be great. You know, I've been there too, right? But if you're not writing, then it's kind of hard to say you're a writer. You know, not that I'm gonna, you know, if someone hasn't written well, because you're not a writer anymore. But it's sort of like, I think it's that Wayne Gretzky thing. Like if you don't, you can't score any goals if you don't take the shot, right? So yeah.
No, that's awesome. So I want to know, who are your role models like that inspire you to write? How have these role models helped you? And do you have a favorite piece of writing that sticks to you that's kind of like helped you to keep motivated to keep writing?
Yeah. You know, and that it changes throughout the years, and it changes with each project in some ways, right? Because so there's that. Lorna Crozier was one of my professors at UVic, and really changed my life, and with both her writing and her mentorship and her teaching. So she has always been a big, profound influence on me. I was a bit of a weird bird, because you know, I was super out in my writing at a time when people weren't. So, you know, I think, you know, anyone who was, you know, out and proud, and, you know, that was a big deal and very inspiring to me. I really gravitated towards stand-up comedians, kind of at different points in my life. So people like Joan Rivers, Margaret Cho, Sandra Bernhardt, those folks who were just kind of dismantling patriarchy and agitating and being funny and profound. Those were big influences. Yeah, but you know, again, it changes per project, because then you start to realize, oh, this person's a wonderful historian, or yeah, you know, I could say a million names. I'm
Yeah,
not going to.
totally. Next, I want to know kind of what your creative process is, like when you're thinking of like, your writing or a story, how it goes from just like a simple idea to a finished project, and like, is there any like specific techniques that you do to like come up with your ideas?
I generally always have a pen with me. I don't know if you can see this. A pen at all times, because you never know when you're going to get the inspiration. I also use my phone. I'm not a total Luddite. But when I listen to my body and listen to myself. So if I'm intrigued, or if I get that kind of like moment, that pang, even if I wake up, I will write something down. Or if I'm on a bus, or I'll make sure that I write down that thing, because that's gold, right? Like that's the gift. and you don't want to not pay attention to that. What else can I say about that? I used to be a night writer, so I would write only at night. Now I'm getting older, so I kind of write in the morning now, and I might revise at night a little bit. So you really just sort of need to know when you're at your strongest. And I try to put my writing time on when I'm most lucid, because if I'm tired or grumpy or whatever, it shows up in the writing.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to make the best use of your time.
And just kind of going off that question, like I guess all writers can experience writer's block, and when you're stuck, you feel like you can't, just nothing's flowing out of you. Is there anything that helps you move past that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I 100% believe in writer's block per se, because I think it can be a little bit dramatic. But I do think like a lot of the time it's like people are friggin' tired, or they're exhausted, or I think it's connected to your mental health. So if you can't really write, maybe you have to do a little bit of self-care, and just do some journaling, or just keep the pen flowing a little bit, and or typing or whatever you do. You have to be kind to yourself, and there could be that writer's block that you are blocked up because you're writing things that are very emotional and very difficult. Well, okay, that's different from, I don't know, you're feeling out of sorts. Well, that can happen to humans at the best of times. So I wouldn't give it too much power, is my kind of suggestion to all my students, really, with the writer's block. And then to just give yourself little goals, like whether it's a paragraph, or try a couple haiku, or just whatever it is, just to kind of break through that impasse that's there.
Mm-hmm. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you're a professor now at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. Is that right?
Yeah, I've been there since 2006. We don't do the professor thing, but I am co-chair of the department, along with fellow UVic alumna, Aslan Hunter. So
do you
there's a lot of UVic in Kwantlen.
You do some teaching now with writing, and
oh yeah. No, I've been that's the majority of what I do.
I just want to know, like, is it hard to balance your life as like teaching versus still having time to work in your own creative work?
It is tough. I mean, I'm really fortunate because I get to talk about poems and short stories in magazines. Like that's a big privilege. It takes a lot of juice, writing, particularly when you're teaching online and it's pandemic stuff. Like that's like, oh boy, didn't expect that one. Yeah, it's there's always those few months where I tend to not really get any big writing projects done during that time, because I'm having to focus on my students. But again, it's such a privilege to read their work, and to teach the possibility of a poem or a short story to students who may have not written a poem since grade 2 or grade 3 or something, right? So yeah, and then I tend to get my students the first year, and then usually third or fourth. So I get them at the beginning and get them at the end. It's so lovely to see what they've learned, and what how their passion has shown up in their writing.
That's awesome. And then I just have one last question to wrap it all up. Is there any current projects or books that you've been working on lately that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I've got a brand new book of poetry. It's called Duct Taped Roses. And it's coming out, I think April, this upcoming April. I don't know if things might change with what's going on in the world, but it'll be out soon. Yeah, so that's a biggie. So I'm happy that that's coming out. That's a new publisher. I previously worked with Arsenal Pulp Press for years, and now time for a little bit of a change. So wonderful publisher, Book Hug in Toronto, and yeah. And then I'm just going to kind of figure out what I want to do next, right? So it's strange times for everybody. So,
yeah. And how long did this book kind of take to complete? A long time?
Yeah, I'm usually pretty prolific, but I think this one took a little bit longer. yeah, I had some death in the family, and there was a lot of loss. So, you know, those poems take a while sometimes. So, there's still a lot of humor in this book, but there's also some realness and you know, dealing with loss and grief and all of that. So
Well, I'll definitely check out that book when it comes out. That's so exciting. So,
good, thank you.
yeah, that's all my questions I have for you today. But I just want to thank you so much for all your great answers and once again for taking the time out of your day. It's been awesome getting to talk with you. I've learned a lot and
Wonderful,
I feel inspired. And I hope this inspires other people as well. So, thank you so
wonderful.
much.
Okay, take care, everybody.
Bye.
Bye bye.